A very, very quick note on the mental epidemic and crises that could be going on within industries. And for that to not sound too complicated or horrendous, um, is there is a certain element of flow, right? Without the rhetoric too, lol. Like we really got to flow through this shit. Like water flows through mountains and rivers, and you could see the rocks metaphorically as their own houses, right? So the water is a feminine expression of spirit, fire being something of the quote unquote masculine, whatever, different expressions of spirit. The fire and water, they're not necessarily worried about per se the surface level human rules of how the earth is being governed and sanctioned, and kind of how rules were rigid in a more outdated time. Not that at all. Rules are not being reflected upon through the outdated lens at all, particularly in this hyper stage of transformation and wherever the fuck we're going, respectively, to wherever future we go in. Because who's to say what future we go in? That depends on our awareness, our growth, intelligence, and maturity. And that growth, intelligence, maturity, and awareness, that dictates the choices we make. And the choices we make and how we feel and how we choose to feel is a micro choice. The mental choices and the emotional choices that we make, that's literally paving and steering and navigating our way to the future that we could create and unfold or not. So if we're not making those correct energy choices, we're not necessarily going to land on the timeline that we would like to land on. It's going to stall us. And there's different reasons for things that are stalled. The work might just be incredibly different. It might have a different quote unquote magnitude, what a human would call greatness, right? A different level of magnitude in the higher energy sense. So what am I talking about right here? It's like, even though we have some type of work to do and that work is not necessarily being carried out, different pursuits of energetic octaves, be it positive or negative, mind the clarity, is saying you might have some type of stalling because a certain type of, not only a process is happening within like what you're doing and how you have to like ground your fire, water, and air respectively. There's also a quote unquote proxy war, and how that could be, and how God will kind of like let you be stasis or standby, or he'll keep giving you energies esoterically within the elements, the go ahead. So you're being given the go ahead beyond the mortal lens. You keep having air in your lungs to breathe. You keep having some type of feminine water, I guess, allowance for you to embody self, the water part of yourself in the human body being a very prominent ingredient for you to exist, and the fire, your spirit being retained in the vessel, and then the earth going through the quote unquote rough patches, and the quote unquote treachery to keep experiencing and going into the future to whatever you're experiencing. The earth kind of like being the thing that's being kind of tuned up, right? So what am I really trying to say here is like, the surface level rules that are changing, that be or that will be or whatever, that thing within the quote unquote the rough coating of the earth paint, original open source or whatever, I can't worry about that too much either. So the point of this video, what am I really trying to say here? I got 9 minutes and 35 seconds on this cuff, and I'm at whatever, it doesn't really matter what time I'm at right now. But I just want to drive one point home. It's like, there comes a point where the spirit of self, it can't necessarily worry about quote unquote plagiarism, because if it worries about quote unquote plagiarism, you're just wasting energy on things that people naturally quote unquote do. But how they take advantage of that, that's their own subjective personal ordeal and thing and deal, right? And I'm not encouraging plagiarism. I'm not saying anything about plagiarism. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. I'm just saying I'm the person in the end of it all that will do the least of it. And I'm just saying that standardly, right? Because I'm just on my own influencer shit, right? But like, if it does happen, and ironically, there's some type of fragile, shallow rules, more or less, and that being changed around it, even if that does happen to whatever light or heavy magnitude, I can't worry about it because that's just gonna like, because I have other work to do, right? And I don't want to let that shit weigh me down. And I'm practicing with my own wisdom philosophy of real subjective to objective, real time objective flow. I'm flowing in through the life and the time and being and embodying things as they are and moving through the turmoils of the proxy war and the different types of reasoning for the wait periods and the wait times and the processing periods. I can't let the burden of the mental, emotional, psychological rhetoric and happening of how someone could quote unquote plagiarize things. I shouldn't worry about that because it's just going to waste my energy, right? So since it's going to waste my energy, therefore that's up to me to practice my own state of objective flow, right? Objective flow, me doing it, right? And that's cool that other people could catch on to that flow state, but like the water is as old as, before the earth itself, because and even as old as time itself, right? So if the water is that old, then the water doesn't necessarily have a problem per se, unless the water is having a new balance with, I guess, the new earth and the new equilibrium of things and the strange amoebias of new equilibriums, original open source. So what am I really trying to say here is like, you have to practice your own wisdom philosophy of objective flow and let other things do their job more or less, right? And as they do their jobs, it might take slow because that element of the earth, that's just how the earth functions. It's some type of slowness. So I'm just saying it generally and ironically maturely, right? So we all quote unquote do it to some degree. So if we all do it, we could have some type of hopefully weird new reasoning of, yeah, it's a shared, quote unquote life earth community, right? Whatever. So some people could like, and so we got to be mature and take it like we got to take it like lightly, but we shouldn't abuse it. Obviously, I'm just saying if we don't talk about it maturely, then it won't get solved. So for me to ironically bring my clarity, knowledge, intelligence, and maturity here to solve that shit, and you want to throw a stone at me for solving the shit that you guys are being possibly hypocritical and contradictive, then that is some type of respective energetic blasphemy, right? So I'm saying like if the plagiarism does happen, you should let other people take care of that shit and not worry about it. And obviously there's an original open source element behind it where we don't necessarily own the elements, we're just using the elements, right? We're just what do you call that, leasing or bartering with the elements, most respectively. So it's like, so how the new rules will be written in the future, we shouldn't worry about that. We can only quote unquote hope for balance, right? So if plagiarism does happen respectively, I'm not going to worry about it because that shit's out of my control. So therefore, the resolve here is for me to flow through that shit and realize, quote unquote, everybody does it, but I do it the least. And I didn't mean to conclude it on that note, but that's just what it is. So I only got 20 seconds on this doc. And just keep flowing through it, and I guess let other people hopefully do their job in balance or not. And I wish I could go longer. Thank you.